Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idol, and before we get to today's article, I want to start you off with a quote from Billy Idol. I don't think punk rock ever really dies because punk rock attitude can never die. And that's a sentiment I mostly agree with. At least I agree with the collective attitude of punk rock never being able to die, because punk rock can mean a lot of different things. However, I believe in an individual, the punk rock attitude can die, and I think that's what we're seeing from Hayley Williams. Hayley Williams calls out NOFX singer Fat Mike for alleged onstage sexual comments. Alrighty. Let's get into this. I read through a little bit of this in advance, mainly because I actually wasn't going to cover this. This was a news article I was reading for me, because I have quite the history of punk rock. I've been playing guitar since I was 16 years old. Punk is the reason that, I got into playing guitar. I learned to play my first power chords, all because of Green Day. Say for that what you will, here we are. Well more than a decade after me learning to play guitar, and I've got some different opinions on Green Day than I used to. But the point is, punk rock holds a major place in my heart and is the reason that I've got so many of the beliefs and values I do. It's even a driving force behind some of the YouTube videos I make, even if it doesn't correlate with music specifically. Punk is an essence, and I think Hayley Williams has lost the plot here. Let's go through, read this, and I'll see if I can explain to you why. Paramore's Hayley Williams has responded to vulgar comments she says NOFX Fat Mike made about her when she was just a teenager. Now, out the gate, this sounds bad because, you hear teenager, you think, child, 13, 14, 15, whatnot. However, I'm going to say up front, the, jokes he made or comments he made, she was 19 when he made them. Absolutely legal adult. Whether you could say that's skeevy or gross, whatever, sure, that's up to interpretation, but he made these comments about her when she was an adult, not when she was a teenager. I mean, teenager technically, but she was an adult. In reflection of Paramore's co-headlining performance for last year's Pop Punk When We Were Young festival, Williams opened up to Billboard about the mixed feelings she had regarding her band's return to the emo scene. The nostalgia-based Las Vegas festival was described as an epic lineup of emo and rock bands from the past 2 decades, but Williams said her memories of the emo heydays were skewed. Everyone's just trying to remember the better days, and I'm sitting here like, they weren't that much better, she said. Well, I mean, that's such a weird view to have. Better is subjective. Are they worse in some ways? Sure. Are they better in some ways? Also absolutely. But to say back then wasn't better than now, well, that's a lot of ground to cover. You can't just make a blanket statement like that, but let's continue. I was really surprised that I had so much anger well up in me because I was like, wait a minute, they're treating us like a prize now. But like Fat Mike used to tell people I gave good rim jobs on stage when I was 19 years old, she said. Alright, and? Did you give good rim jobs? I mean, maybe you gave good rim jobs. Or maybe you and him never had any sort of, sexual whatever, and he was just making jokes. If that's the case, who cares? Bands say outrageous stuff on stage all the time. That's part of the spectacle. That's part of going, not even to a punk rock show, but going to any show. I've been to plenty of concerts. I've been to metal concerts. I've been to punk concerts. I've been to pop concerts. I've even been to country concerts, more or less against my will, but still been there. I've heard some bands on stage say outrageous stuff because that's part of being a performer. That is part of performative arts, is getting the crowd riled up, for better, for worse. When you hear a metal band say something along the lines of, I want you to open this effing pit up, and I want you to go crazy, I want you to burn this venue down, they're not actually calling for you to burn the venue down, they're just riling the crowd up, they're being showmen. I do not think that's punk, and I do not think that's the essence of punk, she continued. Well, it's a good thing you were never a punk band. And I feel strongly that without young women, people of color, and also the queer community, I think we would just still be where we were then. Okay, this doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't get how this correlates to what he said. He made a joke about her specifically, giving good rim jobs or whatnot. That's like making a joke about a coworker or a peer, not making a joke about, women as a whole, or queer people, or trans people, black people, gay people. It doesn't matter. Like, jumping straight to this, woke nonsense, that's not punk. She says, I don't think that's punk, the comments he made. Well, you know what? They are. Because you know what punk rock is? It's going to have a whole lot of different meanings. But I'm going to tell you what punk rock is to me. Punk rock is saying or doing whatever you feel, whatever is in your heart, whatever you truly believe, even if it goes against the grain, goes against the narrative. Punk rock today, yeah, I think it's dead. At least I think the majority of mainstream punk rock is dead. You want to know what's punk rock nowadays? People like Tim Pool, people like The Quartering, every person out there on Twitter who's maybe not even like anti-vax, but questioning the vaccine, saying something like, I don't know if I want to get this, this is a pretty new vaccine, hasn't had a whole lot of testing. That's punk rock, because it's going against the narrative that everyone has stated. Punk rock doesn't even mean you have to be right or you have to be wrong. There is no right and wrong in punk. But it's not conforming. Punk rock is not conformative. And sometimes conforming things is good. We all came together at one point and conformed together to believe, you know what, slavery's bad. That was a good sense of a good version of conforming. But as a whole, conforming for the sake of it, just to fit in, just to do it for the wrong reasons, that's not punk. So when she says that's not punk to her, well, what is punk to you? Because just getting on stage and saying some dorky thing that, okay, maybe it upset you, maybe it's offensive, I don't really care if you don't consider that punk rock. To me, that's absolutely punk rock, because it's the sort of thing that would set a crowd on fire. The sort of thing that you probably shouldn't take too seriously. You can't take 80% of what punks say seriously, because most punks are just there. You know, they're the OG trolls, if we're being legit. Punks are just the OG trolls, and the cyberpunks were the OG trolls of the internet era before being a troll became mainstream. I mean, I don't know what Hayley Williams ever thought punk was, but she's certainly desecrating her roots considering the subject matter that Paramore used to sing about. She's gone so far as to disavow old Paramore songs because of their subject matter. And you know what? Part of being punk is owning up to your past as well, not trying to hide it, not trying to disavow it, just being clean and being like, yeah, I believed that then. I may not believe it now, but I'm not going to stop singing these songs. It's still a part of my history. This was a sentiment Williams also voiced on stage at When We Were Young, telling the crowd, when Paramore came onto the scene roughly around 2005, the scene was not always a safe place to be if you were different. Okay, that's complete bogus. The idea of punk has always been we come together because we're different. And let's not make it seem like, you know, Hayley Williams is the first punk rock female. Way before that, we had my girl, Gwen Stefani. No doubt was punk. But you know what? Before that, we had Patti Smith, The Pretenders. That was, you know, a female-led punk band. There's been plenty of female punks before, so it's not like, you know, there was some gatekeeping in the punk community. And also, I've never experienced gatekeeping in the punk community against queers or against, you know, gay people, black people, whatnot. Now, have I seen a lot of black people in the punk community? No, not really. But you know what? That's fine. Anytime they are there, we of course, we've always welcomed them because we're just happy that people want to air guitar and headbang along with us regardless of their skin color. You want to know who the first people were there to you know, protest for gay rights? It was the punks, because punks have always been anti-government, anti, you know, whatever the mainstream is saying, anti anything that keeps others down, because punks have felt like they've been kept down, so they want to help others as well who are fighting injustice. When you grow up in a small town in America, odds are you're going to hear some conservative talking points. I was no different. Man, when I was a little kid, I'm talking elementary school, yeah, everyone thought being gay was bad. Everyone thought that, you know, guys kissing guys was gross, whatever. And as I grew up, as I found punk rock and realized that, dude, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, literally, punk rock in about probably 6th grade or so was what got me to start thinking about how being gay is no big deal. And trust me, this was years before any sort of movement, you know, about gays getting married or whatnot, at least in the mainstream. I'm talking, this is during the Bush era. So, yeah, punk rock has always been a very welcoming place for, you know, the LGBT community, for people of color when they're part of it. Again, I've not really seen a whole lot of people of color in the punk community, but it's not because they're not welcomed or anything like that. If black dude would rather listen to rap than listen to, you know, Op Ivy, then yeah, that's fine. Do what you want to do, dude. If you were a woman, if you were a person of color, if you were queer, that's really fucked up if you think about it. Look, no. I've played in many punk bands. I've played in many shows. I've played a lot of places in different parts of the country, played live music, and let me tell you, there's been, I'm not saying it didn't happen. Obviously, I'm sure there's individual cases. I can only speak my own anecdotal positions here, but I've never once seen anyone gatekeep a show or say negative things about any of these groups she's talking about at a punk concert that I've either been to, that I've booked, or that I have played in, that I've been on stage at. I've never even heard, yeah, you know what, you had Green Day say faggot a couple times in American Idiot, but they weren't even referring to gay people when doing so. They were talking about the government. They were using the ultimate anti-gay slur. to attack the government. They did the same thing with the N-word in 21st Century Breakdown, if you remember that album. Yeah, that's right, Green Day's dropped the N-word with a hard R. Go back and listen to 21st Century Breakdown album. You'll hear it on, I believe, the second to last track. So the idea that punk rock was gatekept, I feel personally attacked by this because I've spent a long time in the punk community in various different facets, whether, like I said, it be on stage, whether it be booking shows, whether it be in the crowd just as a fan, and I have never seen what she's talking about. This is Hayley Williams trying to separate and sow division within a community that has always, and I mean always, been very, very supportive. Now, in my opinion, we've taken support to too much of a level. Now there's a difference between showing support and getting woke and going broke, and I think that's where we're at. Too much of a good thing. We've overextended, both in politics, in the punk crowd, online, on Twitter, whatever. I think most of the collective world has overextended, and that's why I say, when I said earlier, the real punks are people like Tim Pool, people like The Quartering. Honestly, if I could lump myself in, even though I'm a pretty small individual, people like me who are willing to step back and be like, no, let's rein it in. We're overstepping at this point, because now we're going against the grain, saying, hey, maybe giving 7-year-old children hormones because they say that they're the wrong gender, maybe that's a step too far, and then we get ostracized for it. We get attacked on Twitter. We're called bigots. Well, guess what? Bigot now is that's being punk rock. There's legit bigots out there. There's the 60-year-old white guys that want to see black people back in chains. Yeah, they're bigots. People like me who are just saying, let's wait till the child is an adult before we start lopping parts out their body and let them make that decision for themselves once they're, of mental capacity to really be sure they want to commit to such a decision. That's not bigoted. And the fact that it's treating like, the fact that I'm treated like a bigot, or the fact that any of these big name YouTubers that are called right wing, called conservative, called, alt-right or whatever, when most of them are either just slightly left of center or center, maybe slightly right, the fact that they're called bigots, nah, to me, they're punk rock. Geeks and gamers, I don't agree with half of what they say, but the fact that they go out there and say it, despite the fact that someone could swat them at any minute, that's punk rock to me. I've had my fill of letting older people, especially older men, tell me what punk rock is and tell me what punk rock is not. Okay, well, I've had my fill of has-been punk rockers telling me what punk rock is and what punk rock isn't when they're the ones siding with the government and going against what, at least in my opinion, punk has stood for since the inception of punk rock. Man, if Sid Vicious were alive today and he heard Hayley Williams talking like this, I think he would pimp slap her. And you know what? That might be rude to say, that might be misogynistic, but Sid Vicious, it wouldn't be the first time he's hit a woman. And I'm not saying he's some sort of hero or anything. I'm not saying we should look to Sid Vicious for guidance. I'm just saying that he would find this stance highly suspect to be called punk rock. At least that's my opinion. Just today, there was a crusty old fuck on the internet saying that punk was supposed to be anti-establishment. Well, that is an aspect. That is some things that people consider punk, yeah. Well, it is. And actually, I can think of nothing more anti-establishment than young women, than people of color, and the queer community. How are they anti-establishment? Anti-establishment means to be going against the government, to be against the establishment. All the people that all the groups that you just named are very pro-government. Hop on Twitter and tell me that, obviously I'm not going to say all women, or all of the trans community, or LGBT community, or all of the, people of color are pro-government. That would be, I'm not going to blanket everyone and say they all think the same if they're part of this group, unlike what Hayley Williams is doing here. But I am going to say, if you hop onto Twitter and you check, people, they got pronouns in their bios, they probably have a particular leaning, and that particular leaning is probably pro very big government. And that's not anti-establishment. That is very pro-establishment. Just saying that, oh, young women, people of color, the queer community, how is that anti-establishment? Like, give me an example, and maybe we can have a dialogue. But just stating that and then mic dropping like you made some big grand revelation about punk rock and about the status of what punk means, no, you're giving us word salad as a talking head for a political opinion. That's not punk rock. A representative for Fat Mike did not immediately respond to Variety's request for comments. Well, good, he shouldn't have to. Look, all I'm saying here is that Hayley Williams is not punk rock. Paramore is not punk rock. And in my opinion, they haven't been for some time because punk has died. There's only one still semi-famous band I can consider truly punk rock, and that's Bowling for Soup. And you want to know why? Because Bowling for Soup hasn't changed. They're still as silly and goofy and fun as ever. Their subject matter hasn't changed. They're not out there doing the sort of stuff that Operation Ivy or NOFX were doing back in the 90s, or Pennywise, or old school AFI. They're not doing anything like that, but they are still themselves. They're still playing, entire songs with 3 chords and just singing about what matters to them. Friends, chicks, guitars, and beer. I mean, that's literally a quote from one of their songs. Well, it's actually friends, chicks, guitars, and no beer. But point is, they're still singing about the same stuff they were singing about in the late 90s, early 2000s. Bowling for Soup is stuck to their roots. They're not out here trying to make any sort of political messages. It just drives me crazy she's throwing such a fit over something that Fat Mike said on stage about her. Guess what? Blink-182 one time was playing a show in Australia where they talked about, on stage, about bombing New Zealand because New Zealand doesn't even need to be there. Do you think they were really wanting Australians to bomb New Zealand? Are Blink-182 terrorists because of what they said on stage? Or are you going to try and cancel them next? Is Tom DeLonge now going to be canceled for making a joke about bombing New Zealand? I don't know, the dude's looking for UFOs. Maybe the Taliban's going to reach out to him and be like, yeah, we'll help you find the aliens. If you, put this vest on and run over to New Zealand and blow yourself up, we'll make sure that you get 72 aliens. No, I'm sorry. Hayley Williams, she's a nut. She does not represent punk rock. Paramore doesn't represent punk rock. And I'm going to leave you here with one more quote. I started the video with a quote from Billy Idol. We'll end it here too. Like George Lucas said, it's like poetry. It rhymes. They wouldn't play my records on American radio because I had spiky hair. They said, punk rock doesn't sell advertising. It won't make any money. That's punk rock. Doing what you love regardless of whether it's going to make money. Hayley Williams is selling out with a political narrative like this. That is not punk rock. But that's just my opinion. Let me know yours in the comments below, or you can find me on Twitter at BoltTheWord. I would love to have a discussion about punk rock and what music and the movement in general means to all of you guys for the past, the present, and the future. And hey, maybe, this get woke, go broke stuff isn't your cup of tea when it comes to music, but maybe it is for video games or card games. Well, then subscribe to me and check out the back catalog, because I got videos about Magic the Gathering, Star Wars, Hogwarts Legacy, you name it. If it's here in the nerdosphere, then I've done a video on it. So please subscribe, because this has been Words of Paradise.